Now, I know you've heard all day about Newspoll. We told you, of course, about it first last night. That's why Sunday night, hardcores. Doesn't matter if there's sport on, another thing, the final of this, the semi-final. Make sure that you series link this program if you're watching it and can do so via Foxtel. Make sure that you favourite it, like it if you watch it in all the other platforms, and make sure that you get that podcast and suggest it to a friend. As we told you, the Liberal Party back in front after the summer, a summer that was yet again another reset for the Prime Minister. But I want to take some time to talk about some of the other things that are deeper inside the poll, including people's perceptions of what is about to happen at the federal election. Now, primary vote under the Newspoll, it is down from the last election for the Labor Party, down by a couple of points. For the Libs and Nats, it is up by quite a few points, as you can see there, up to 39, down to 31. The two-party preferred is now ALP 49 and the coalition at 51. But the angle that Simon Benson put on the story about the poll has been much of the discussion today, that a majority of voters now believe that the coalition is going to win the next election. Now, remember, the polls have been pointing this way. The bookies think that's the case. And 47% of people say that a Labor government, majority or minority, will end up being the one put in place, or it's going to be a Liberal national government to the tone of 53%. I'll act out the numbers for you if you want me to, but there we go, 47. Now, interestingly, 51% of Labor voters think that their government, the best they can do is form a minority. But I want everyone to sit down and have a chat who would like to see a change of government and the Liberal National Party being the one that form it. 46% of people told Newspoll, of Liberal and National voters, that they think that they won't just get there via minority, they'll get there via a majority. Okay? There's also a bit of a gender split here. You know how the Liberal Party's got a problem with women? No, not quite. You see, men think that Labor will get there via minority at 51% versus 49%, and it is women who believe that the Liberal National Party will be the next government of Australia, 58% to 42%. Oh, but the Liberals have a problem with women. Get ready for that to be one of the tactics that Labor plays, and plays hard in the next little while. Now, the reason I want to have a chat with you about this tonight is that I want to deliver a reality check. Not because I don't think the government is terrible, not because I don't think that the issues are going their way, not because I think that at no other point in time has the establishment and access media sources been as ignored as they are right now, but more so, I want you to understand the hill that needs to be climbed, because it is quite significant for the LNP. Let me explain here. So you need 76 seats to form a majority. Labor currently has 78, meaning, of course, that they can lose 2 seats and still be in a majority. Lose 3, they go into a minority. But with the Greens, you now start to see the numbers have to push down to like 74 seats, or even if they start to push down to 72, the Greens would be able to save them. Depending on how many of the Teals stick around, well, that too could mean that we're not talking about losing 4 here and 4 there. They could end up losing almost 10 and still have a pretty viable, negotiable path back into government. Now, that means that what you do with your preferences matters more than ever before, because it's not just about the seats that the Liberal Party will win in its own right or return back to the fold. Places like a Benelong in New South Wales or a Gilmore in New South Wales, both were seats that were decided by about 1,000 or even less than 500 votes in the one of Gilmore, which is in and around Batemans Bay and the South Coast. But they do need preferences to go their way, meaning if you are somebody who is about the 20% of Australians that are currently sitting outside of Team Red or Team Blue, well, what you do with your number 2 is going to determine what happens here. Now, interestingly, some eagle-eyed people have noticed about the opinion polls and about how they have been pulled apart and how we get to, say, 51-49, is that we end up getting there because it's based off the preferences of the last election. Now, in 2019, the surprise election result was because people who didn't vote for the Liberal and National Party first did put them at number 2, meaning that preferences were flowing, let's roughly say, 2/3 back to the coalition, and that meant that they were able to get enough seats to get a majority in their own right. Now, there were no Teals back then, but still, that is the maths. In 2022, when some of the messaging that was out there was bugger them all, kind of 2 out of 3 ended up not going back. They may have eventually, but they were sent on a very long journey. It meant that, say, some local independents were able to end up getting to the 2-party runoff with Labor as opposed to the Liberal and National Party. But again, I want you to understand that where it sits right now is not, hallelujah, this is going to happen. The spin that was put on it today from experienced people writing at news.com.au say that the best interpretation of the polls is a potential win of between 7 and 14 seats. Now, as you can see, the coalition desperately does need an awful lot more seats than that to be able to get close enough to a position where literally they have to have more seats than the Labor Party, and then the Teals and independents and people like Rebecca Sharkey, who most likely would get re-elected in the seat of Mayo in South Australia, and Bob Katter have all sort of said that basically the team that has the most number of seats is the one with the first right to govern, and that's how the negotiations begin. Remember that Anthony Albanese's job, one of them, in 2010 to 2013 was to wrangle the crossbench. Now, of course, he was easily able to do it because there were turncoats like Oakeshott and Windsor who would do anything to deny their former party any path towards government. But we all know that that 2010 to 2013 period led to the massive win of Tony Abbott, only to be squandered by 2016, when again preferences and primary votes started to change. So let's have a look here. Last night and every Sunday night, again, a reason why I want you to watch that Sunday night show, record that Sunday night show, watch it the next day, whatever, but be here on Sunday night because we're going to do a segment every Sunday night. We've done this since we came back a couple of weeks ago, where we sit down with Michael Kroger, who knows tactics and the best case scenario for those who want to see a change in government. But we also have a chat to the people from Redbridge. These are the people who are doing serious data and analysis. They're not just doing polls, they're doing focus groups, and they are, at the moment, the people who are willing to tell us a lot of what's happening behind the scenes when it comes to part of the data. Now, the Redbridge group will join us each and every Sunday night to go through the very latest data and also what they are hearing out of the focus groups. Now, again, none of this is an exact science. As we've said before with the United States, look at where the bookies are, probably more so than the polls, but all of the bookies right now say there will be a change of government. So if that's going to come from somewhere, where does it come from? This was their suggestion last night.
The election's going to be decided in New South Wales and Victoria. Yep, Libs could pick up a couple of seats in WA, but it's only a couple, right? You've got to make up the 18 seats. So you need numbers. You need those big numbers. Those big numbers are in New South Wales and Victoria.
So I had a look at this today. Of all of the seats that are needed to get the coalition into a majority government. So again, the most unlikely of the scenarios, but the best case scenario for Peter Dutton and his supporters, and no doubt many people watching right now who would like that to be the case. Well, where are the most marginal seats? I had a look at about 18 of the most marginal seats for the Labor Party, and this is what it shows you. That 6 of them are in New South Wales, 6 of them are in Victoria. 12 seats is great, but 12 seats may not get you into a position where you have more seats than the Labor Party, and the Labor Party would then be in the box seat to be able to potentially negotiate its way back to power. It would be a terrible, inferior government, but I'm trying to temper the expectation. If the largest number of people who plan to vote for the coalition are saying that their expectation is a coalition majority, there's a lot more work to do outside of New South Wales and Victoria. Potentially, 2 of the most vulnerable seats are in Western Australia for Labor, 2 in Tasmania, taking the clean sweep all the way from the north down to halfway through Tasmania. They don't have many seats up for grabs in Queensland. 1 is the one most likely, and again, Boothby in South Australia. Put all that together, yeah, you get to a coalition majority. But as you can see, we have to try to have a look at what is happening state by state, which takes us over to the Resolve Political Monitor. These are the polls that come out on the Channel 9 websites and newspapers, and it shows that nationally, Peter Dutton is the preferred Prime Minister. Right now, 39 to 34. in the seats where 12 are up for grabs, Dutton is leading by a huge number in New South Wales, a very strong number in Victoria, and then once you start to add a 13th seat, say in Queensland, Dutton is absolutely thumping home there. But, again, let me caution you, 13 seats does not a majority make. The rest of Australia, by a slim margin, so we're talking about Western Australia, South Australia, Tasmania and the Northern Territory, but not too much polling happens in the Northern Territory. And yes, there's a seat up for grabs in the Northern Territory and 2 in South Australia, and 2 in Tasmania and 2 in South Australia and 2 in Western Australia. And if all that goes their way, then of course a majority government. But it's so fascinating to look at the picture that nationally, the strength on the east coast of the mainland is pretty obvious here, where the bulk of the seats are and a couple of surprises might turn up, that is where the best shot of pulling it all together is, because that's the most number of seats, the most number of contested seats and the most number of population. But the wrinkle is that outside of those areas, still and ever so slightly, it is Albanese who is the preferred Prime Minister. So watch this space. Now, again, the purpose of this show and the purpose of what we try to do here each and every night is I've got a very strong opinion. And I'm going to chase these people as hard as I've ever chased them because the future of the country is at risk. 3 more years after the 3 years that we had cannot be tolerated, will not be acceptable to the vast majority of Australians who have been doing it particularly tough. Demographics and a whole bunch of other reasons, including that block of teals, is the difference. But I'm also not going to hide from you the data, the polling, in the context of other polling, that is going to give us a slightly clearer picture of how realistic the options are. The 4 options on the table, from Labor majority to Labor minority to Liberal national minority to Liberal national majority. Now, increasingly in polls, there are lots of undecideds. When they are breaking the coalition's way, but we are only at the start of a process. The start of a process where the Prime Minister has attempted yet another reset and it hasn't moved the needle. But you know the air cover he's going to get from his mates in the press and the activists who will promise to make life hell. You've got to hope that people will see the difference between the two teams and make a conclusion that obviously you and I would be hoping for. But I'm not going to muck around and I'm not going to happy talk. I'm going to tell you what's really going on. And yes, I'll have my opinion and we'll point out plenty of holes in everything that they've done. But my promise to you is to always tell you what's really going on, not just at times what we'd like to be going on or the message that we would just love to float amongst the population. So it was cautionary to me to see the people who are voting Liberal National, who think they're going to go for a majority. Great, keep up the confidence. But you've got to convince your neighbour, you've got to convince your friend about their preferences. You've got to do that work to amplify some of the facts that you hear on this program. By sharing some of the content, you do all of that, skynews.com.au, and share it on any and all of your socials.